Hey everyone, welcome to the open question. Why do people believe in gods? Not just any gods, but gods with minds, moods, personalities, preferences, and even political opinions. Gods that seem to love what the believer loves and hate what the believer hates. Gods that strangely resemble the people who believe in them. If God is supposed to be a universal force, why is he different depending on where you were born? A child raised in India is likely to worship Vishnu or Shiva. A child raised in Iraq might be taught to revere Allah. A child born in Utah may grow up learning about Jesus Christ. The God that most people believe in is the one that happens to be popular in their region. Long before they understand theology, they've already inherited a belief. This isn't a coincidence, it's a pattern. And the pattern reveals something deeper about human psychology. Religion is often portrayed as a path to truth. But if we pay close attention, it looks more like a mirror. One that reflects back our desires, fears, morals, and biases, except with divine authority stamped on top. That's what makes it powerful. Not the God, but the projection. Human brains are storytelling machines. We look for meaning even where there is none. We see patterns in noise. We attribute agency to random events. That rustling in the bushes might be a predator, or a spirit, or a test from God. The habit of assigning agency, of assuming someone or something is behind what we don't understand, has been built into us over thousands of years. It helped our ancestors survive. But in the modern world, that same tendency can lead us to believe in invisible agents even when none exist. Religion thrives in uncertainty. The more ambiguous an experience is, the more likely it will be interpreted as spiritual. A voice in your head during stress. A feeling of being watched while alone. A coincidence that seems too perfect. Our minds are quick to turn these into signs. Not because they're real, but because they feel real. In psychology, this is called agency detection, and it's often hypersensitive. Better to wrongly think there's a God watching than to miss a threat, or so our brains think. But it goes deeper than just misfiring instincts. We don't just invent gods out of fear. We mold them into our personal therapists, judges, and friends. We give them opinions, and these opinions often match our own. When people are asked what God thinks about hot-button issues, abortion, immigration, war, marriage, God's views suspiciously reflect the person's own stance. In studies, when people's personal views shift, so does their perception of God's view. The divine conveniently evolves alongside the believer. This isn't just coincidence. It's called egocentric projection. We subconsciously assume that if something feels right to us, then it must feel right to God. The God is just us, in disguise. This also shows up in morality. Most believers claim their moral compass comes from their religion. But when tested, their moral judgments don't rely on Scripture. Instead, they rely on human intuition, and the religion is used afterward to justify it. People don't steal or lie or cheat because it feels wrong, not because they're afraid of hell. Religion just provides the paperwork to support what they already feel. In one experiment, participants were asked to reflect on their own views and on what they thought God's views were. Then they were given new information that either challenged or supported their stance. When their personal views changed, their view of God's opinion also changed, almost as if God updated his opinion right along with them. This kind of projection turns God into a moral puppet, a sacred ventriloquist dummy. Religion also helps people feel in control in a chaotic world. When life is unpredictable, illness, unemployment, war, disaster, people turn to belief systems that offer stability. Studies show that in countries with high inequality, low healthcare, and weak social systems, belief in God is much higher. Not because people are more spiritual, but because they're more vulnerable. God becomes a psychological safety net. When humans can't rely on society, they invent someone who can never leave them. This is called compensatory control. The more out of control someone feels, the more they seek order, even if that order is imaginary. God, in this sense, is a response to helplessness. But this isn't always conscious. Most believers aren't thinking, I feel powerless, so I will create a divine being. It happens automatically. And because it's happening inside their own minds, it feels authentic. Another psychological trait that feeds religious belief is something called absorption. This is the tendency to get completely immersed in experiences. People high in absorption are more likely to report spiritual experiences, visions, or hearing voices. Not because they're lying or faking, but because they're more mentally open to blurred boundaries between imagination and reality. It's the same trait that makes people excellent actors, artists, or even hypnotic subjects. It also makes them more prone to religious ecstasy, to feeling that prayers are being answered or that a divine presence is in the room. But again, these are internal states misread as external ones. And social pressure amplifies it all. Religious rituals are rarely done alone. They happen in groups, singing together, chanting, kneeling, bowing. These are not just spiritual acts. They are powerful psychological tools that foster group cohesion and emotional synchronization. Think of a concert or a political rally. The collective emotion becomes contagious. You feel part of something bigger. In religion, that feeling is then labeled as God's presence. But in truth, it's a group-generated high. And the need to belong, to be accepted, is one of the strongest human drives. When the people around you believe, it becomes harder not to believe. You want to fit in. You want to be loved. You don't want to be the outsider. Religious identity gives people not just beliefs but belonging. And rejecting the belief often means losing the group. For many, that cost is too high. So they stay, not because they're convinced, but because they're connected. And this explains why people can follow religions with moral contradictions. Why people can worship gods who seem cruel, unfair, or even immoral. Once you tie your social identity to a belief, the belief becomes harder to question. Your brain finds ways to justify it. This is called motivated reasoning. It's not about seeking truth. It's about protecting your worldview. Once someone is emotionally invested in an idea, facts stop mattering. They'll twist logic, ignore evidence, and cling to the belief because the belief feels safe. And religion often reinforces this by labeling doubt as sin. Questioning isn't encouraged. It's punished. Which is ironic, because any belief that can't survive questioning wasn't strong to begin with. Even ideas of the afterlife are tailored to personal desires. Some imagine paradise with family reunions. Others picture endless pleasure or perfect justice. These visions are shaped by what people feel they lack in this life. Heaven becomes a custom-designed fantasy, not because there's evidence for it, but because it's comforting. And fear of death plays a huge role. Knowing that life ends is terrifying. The idea that our memories, thoughts, and consciousness will vanish is difficult to accept. Religion offers an easy answer. You won't die, not really. You'll live on. Somewhere. Somehow. This belief is powerful, but it's based on hope, not evidence. In psychological terms, this is called terror management theory. When reminded of their own mortality, people become more defensive of their worldview, more aggressive toward outsiders, and more devout in their religion. Not because they've found new truth, but because they're scared. Fear makes belief stronger. And the tragedy is, many people never examine these patterns. They assume their faith is a personal choice. But most of the time, it's an emotional reaction to childhood conditioning, social pressure, mental biases, and existential fear. In a way, religion isn't the cause, it's the effect. An effect of loneliness, of trauma, of confusion, of culture, of biology, of psychology, and when we strip away the divine explanations, we see something very human underneath. Religion tells people what they want to hear, that they're not alone, that life has meaning, that justice will be done, and that death is not the end. These are beautiful stories. but they're stories, not truth. Belief is comforting, but comfort isn't proof. We don't need invisible beings to explain life anymore. Science has given us better tools. Philosophy has given us better questions. And psychology has shown us that the gods we worship often look a lot like us. Because we made them. And once we understand that, we can stop looking for answers in the sky and start looking for them within ourselves. That's where the real search begins. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.